Good afternoon. I was just getting my groove on with that music. I'm Cassandra Pye with Lucas Public Affairs, and I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon's conversation, She Shares Conversation with Los Angeles Supervisor Holly J. Mitchell. Before we get to the program, I'd like to recognize our sponsors. I'll keep going. Kaiser, Sutter Health, there we go. Aurora Health Group, Nemala Pappas and Associates, slow down, Blue Shield of California, PG&E, BMW Group of North America, Politico, Calpine, the California Center for Civic Participation, the Dewey Square Group, Torlixon Events, Dry Bar, KCRA, Comstocks, and Cap Radio as our media sponsors. Thank you so much for your support. All of these sponsors make She Shares possible, especially the year-long mentorship program. This year we have 68 pairs, 136 women participating. This program pairs young women, newer in their career, up with women who are further along in their career. And we're really, really thrilled to have the support for that program. I'd also like to introduce the newly formed She Shares Board of Directors. These are women who have supported She Shares for many years, but there are also some new faces and young faces coming on board to bring some new ideas to the table. So please let me introduce Kelly Boyd with Golden Grid Technologies, my colleague Daisy Castellon with Lucas Public Affairs, Connie Delgado with Delgado Government Affairs. There's Margaret Gladstein with Capital Advocacy, LaKenya Jordan, one of my friends and a new deputy to the California Secretary of State, Ariel Julie with HBO Max, my buddy and partner in crime, Donna Lucas with Lucas Public Affairs, Lisa Page with Sutter Health, Tina Thomas, one of the originals with Thomas Law Group, Linda White of BMW of North America. Thank you so much for being part of She Shares. And now, the moment I've certainly been waiting for, let's get to the main event. So, this was fun to do. I'll start this way. I'm West Coast. She's East Coast. She's really tall, and I am vertically challenged. I'm a Republican. She's a Democrat. She's amazingly photogenic, and I am not. She's got a crown of long locks, and my crown, as you can see, is quite the opposite. But what Holly and I have in common far outweighs our differences. She had a strong, imposing mother who was her best friend. So did I. She is a mother of a son, Ryan, very handsome son. I have 4. She does her homework because she knows she has to. We were both taught that at a very early age. She is deeply, deeply passionate about government making provisions for women and children living in poverty. I am a Republican who still believes in small government, but I'm being honest with you. It was Holly Mitchell, above all, who convinced me that where women and children are concerned, there has to be an exception. She is a gatherer and a processor of information. She's unapologetic, and I mean that, and consistent. But her opinions are based on research and they're knowledge-based. She reads, she puts the time in. That's why, in the words of her former chief of staff, Tiffany Alvarez, she resonates from a bipartisan perspective. People know she's not a party line progressive. She stakes out her ground once she's done her homework. Holly J. Mitchell is a member of the LA County Board of Supervisors. As many of you now know, that board is now composed exclusively of women. She served as a state senator for California's 30th Senate District from 2013 to 2020 and was a member of the state assembly representing the 54th AD. Holly was the first Black American to chair the Senate Budget Committee in California and oversaw the passage and adoption of 2 consecutive state budgets totaling over $200 million. $200 billion with a B, sorry. Before working in the legislature, Holly served 7 years as CEO of the nonprofit Crystal Stairs. She was also a consultant to the Senate Health Committee and worked as a legislative advocate for the Western Center on Law and Poverty. Most of you already know a lot of this. What you may not know is that in 1999, while sitting on a beach in Hawaii, she decided to adopt a child. When she announced her decision to her family at a Thanksgiving dinner, her mother defended her decision, saying this: "Holly is thoughtful and strategic and plans everything. This is a good decision." Like I said, Holly's consistent. I am adopted. And when I learned that Ryan was her adopted son, well, that was just one more thing we have in common. I respect her and I deeply admire her. And I don't have the words to express how proud I am of Holly. It has brought me so much joy to address her as senator, now as supervisor, but best of all, to address her as friend. Fasten your seatbelts. It's about to get real. Please welcome Supervisor Holly J. Mitchell and our own Edie Lambert for a She Shares conversation. Ladies.
Cassandra, thank you. Supervisor Mitchell, you're wiping your eyes. Let's just start right there. If we're getting real, let's just start right there.
That was a beautiful introduction. I am mad as hell that she made me cry. I had to rip off my lovely fake eyelashes I had applied to be with Edie Lambert because that was beautiful. I think that introduction is an example of you never know in sharing your story how and when it will resonate with people, and how wonderful to learn that and hear that. So Cassandra, from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
You know, Supervisor Mitchell, it's funny that we're talking for the first time now that you've left Sacramento and you're down in Los Angeles
Right.
full time. But, you know, I have watched your career for a long time, both when you were up here in Sacramento and now reading and watching and listening to interviews that you've been doing over the last 6 months as a member of the LA County Board of Supervisors. And what has always stood out to me is this is a woman who is all in and doing work that she is really passionate about and in for the right reasons. So before we talk about what you're up to, I would love to start with just what fuels the work that you do and the heart behind it.
I appreciate that, and it's my honor to share space with you today. You brought me my news for the 10 years I was in Sacramento, and so I'm fangirling right now, which is why I painstakingly applied my false lashes that now you won't see, because thanks to our friend Cassandra, they're gone. Anyway, so I'm thrilled to be able to share this space with you. You know, everything Cassandra said was right. I did have this larger than life, amazing mother who was a prison warden, Edie. Imagine that. During my middle school and high school years, your mother's a prison warden, right?
Yeah, a lot of moms just act
right, exactly. Well, she acted like one and was one. Yeah, she was one at work and home. I'll put it that way. And, you know, while she loved me unconditionally and supported me, she didn't always kind of emote. You know, she emoted. She began to emote when Ryan was born. She was the premier grandmother. And I would say, like, who are you? Bring my mother back. Anyway, I overheard her at my Senate swearing in say to her best friend, Holly was born to do this. And it hit me in a real, I think, meaningful and profound way. And I really, in a corny kind of way, feel that I was. And that all of my really powerful, amazing life experiences, the amazing people that have been in my life, from Diane Watson, who was my first boss when she was senator and chair of the Senate Health and Human Services Committee and gave me a job at 22, 23, to the two women who co-founded Crystal Stairs, Karen Hill Scott and Alice Walker Duff, their vision of pouring into the children of South LA, all of those life experiences. The fact that my parents met as eligibility workers working for LA County Department of Public Social Services, literally. You know, all of those life experiences have contributed to where I am today. And the belief I bring forward, I remember that conversation with Cassandra when I talked about the role government can and must play in creating an equal playground, if you will, for all of California's children. Um, all of those life experiences have helped fuel that core belief that brought me to Crystal Stairs, that brought me to the Western Center on Law and Poverty, that brought me to the legislature, now brought me back home to LA, serving on one of the most powerful elected bodies in the country in a time such as this when government has the unique opportunity and responsibility to save lives.
So let's talk about that transition from being up in Sacramento to now being a member of the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. And in particular, one of the things that I was wondering is what it's like to be one of 5 instead of one of 40 or one of 80, whether that's kind of liberating.
It is completely liberating. You're absolutely right. A. B. You know, the LA County Board of Supervisors is a unique animal. It's both legislative and administrative. You know, there's no governor of LA County.
Right.
So it's 5 of us who have the awesome responsibility of making policy and setting an administrative kind of vision and direction for a county of 10 million. That in and of itself makes it unique. You know, I felt like at the legislature, I was at the 10,000 foot level establishing policy, where at the county level of government is the safety net. It is designed to catch people before they fall. And so this is where I get to actually operationalize so many of those policies that I was a part of establishing, operationalize the programs that I helped fund as budget chair. And so it really is where the rubber meets the road in a meaningful way.
You know, what's one of the places that you kind of walked through this pandemic, switching jobs mid-pandemic. And here in Sacramento, I know at the beginning of the pandemic, it was really all about getting testing into some of these communities. Now that you're actually in your district, it's been really making sure that people can get vaccinated in the areas that are often overlooked.
Absolutely. And I started on the kind of testing bandwagon when I was still in the Senate. You know, my staff, we looked at the areas that had popped up in my Senate district. My supervisorial district, 70% of my supervisorial district was my Senate district. So I had so much overlap, which is very helpful. And so my Senate staff had begun to look, and we realized that there were major sections of the district where there was no testing. So I started in the Senate partnering with St. John's Well Child and Family Center and LAUSD to identify community-based testing sites. So our first testing site was 108th Street School. From there, I transitioned to the Board of Supervisors, and then we began to then look at vaccination sites and recognize once again there were major areas of the district where we know we had disproportionately high rates of the virus and yet no testing sites. We were thrilled to work with the county to set up the mega sites, which was great, even if you have access to the internet and a car, because the mega sites you had to drive through. So we did what we know how to do. We organized at the grassroots level. We reached out to the community-based organizations I've spent my entire professional career working collaboratively with and set up pop-up sites. We partnered with the faith-based community, the CBOs, and set up sites in every corner that we could, and brought in people who it's their job every day to do community based interventions and outreach. We're at a place now where, for a variety of reasons, people are having a difficult time trusting government. People felt abandoned, quite frankly, in my community by the federal government, who lost valuable time in terms of outreach with regard to this pandemic. And so we had to switch reels, to make sure that we were sending messengers out into the community that would be received by the community. So I'm proud of the work we've done, and yet and still it's not enough. Only 42% of African Americans in LA County have been fully vaccinated, and about 52% of my Latinx brothers and sisters. So we have much more work to do, particularly with this variant and targeting our 18 to 24-year-olds whose vaccination rates are even worse than the statistics I just shared.
Well, we're talking about you moving to the Board of Supervisors. It's also a historic time with 5 women serving. How is that? What are I guess maybe the strengths, and are there maybe some challenges of not having a male voice on the board?
So, I have to say that onboarding has been a challenge. I mean, I've not been in a room with all 4 of my colleagues yet. We're still meeting virtually. So you could imagine onboarding a whole new staff, a team, all virtually. I, for the first time, Juneteenth, at our Juneteenth community event, saw all 45 of my new team members together at the same place. And I choked up. They have hit the ground running. We have spent 6 months delivering services to 2 million residents in this virtual remote setting with food giveaways and setting up these pop-up vaccination sites. So it was powerful and amazing all at the same time. You know, um, these are 4 badass women, pardon my French, who, but for the fact that of our gender, have very different life experiences and bring all of our own unique perspective to the table. So while we're all female, it's probably one of the most diverse, besides our gender, elected bodies in the country. Was amazing history. A labor secretary, 2 former members of Congress, 2 former legislators, um, Catherine, who grew up in the county and who knows every nook and cranny of county operations and government, um, a second generation supervisor. Kenny Hahn served the second district for over 40 years. So when you look at the perspective that we all bring and the probably hundreds of years of public policy expertise and commitment, it's really mind blowing. That's what people got by electing all 5 of us. And I think the county is benefiting from it, particularly now. To watch the leadership of Catherine Barger and now Hilda Solis during this pandemic has been nothing short of amazing. Do we all always agree on everything? Of course not. Um, are we all committed to a LA County recovery that will focus on equity? Are we all clear that women and girls disproportionately were harmed by this dual pandemic, public health and economic? Absolutely. Are we committed to that? Yes. This is a board that was so forward thinking. They created initiatives around anti-racism, putting
Mhm.
girls and women first, and creating a care first, jails last model. And so that's what these 4 women brought to the table that I was able to join this past December. And I couldn't be more proud and more excited.
I think that the maybe stereotype of women working together is that it tends to be more of a collaborative process, maybe less about who's the top dog. Do you find that to be true?
I think it's not just a stereotype. I think research validates that, Edie, I must say. The Center for the American Woman in Politics at Rutgers has studied women in public office for decades, and they look at the results when there are more women serving on elected bodies. the quality and caliber of the policy that comes from those elected bodies. And so I think I have found that to be true. When the numbers of women elected to the state legislature, when our women's caucus numbers went up, it no longer was it as hard a fight to talk about funding early care and education. No longer were we struggling with, paid family leave. When more women are at the table, we were able to help define these issues as working families issues, not just women's issues. And I find that the same with the legislature. Now, we're all elected. We all have a little ego. We all think, our ideas and our motions are the best thing since sliced bread. That's just reality. But I find that we are able to work collaboratively. Communication is smooth and flawless, and I'm having a good time.
So much of your work throughout your career has focused on children in particular. And one of the things that has struck me is that when you are helping a child, you're helping their surroundings, their siblings, their family, their schools, and who they're going to become in the future. But so much of what I see is crisis related. It's, feeding a hungry child today. And that work is really important. But so much of what you are doing is to prevent a child from even becoming hungry in the first place. And so let's talk about, getting to the heart of these issues instead of just putting out fires.
I couldn't agree with you more, which is why I've always talked about my work, focusing on, poverty alleviation. Although I had a wonderful session recently with a young woman I worked alongside in the legislature who gave me a new term. And she said it's, poverty disruption. And I love that way of thinking about it, because we do have to disrupt. It's an action oriented, word that reminds us that some systems have been set up to allow people to fall into poverty and to sustain that level of meager existence. And so my goal is to be a disruptor, to dismantle multi-generational poverty experiences, and to make sure that government isn't either consciously or unconsciously contributing to it. I have to tell you, Edie, I have a bit of a reputation of sometimes showing out in public places. I call it telling the truth. But I was at a poverty conference at USC about 2 years ago, filled with former governors, former legislative leaders who were opining about poverty and how we got to where we are, and kind of pointing the finger at the legislature today about what we should do. And Edie, I lost my mind. I was so angry, and I got up on that stage and I reminded all of them about actions they took that led to the level of child poverty in California today. And I
Like
broke
what?
it down governor by governor, like when Governor Schwarzenegger proposed to eliminate the wholesale elimination of CalWORKs, like under the leadership of former Senate President Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg, when we cut the CalWORKs cash grant by 8% in the middle of a recession when people need government investment the most. And so I wasn't just trying to put them on blast, but the point was we can't point the finger to other people. And that if we really want to talk about how we got to this current pandemic level of unhoused, and the number of women and mothers and children who are unhoused in LA County and the statewide, we can't act like it happened overnight. I attribute it to a slow boil that every level of government and all of us involved in government took our turn turning up the heat that got us to where we are. So when we cut CalWORKs, when we took $1 billion out of the subsidized child care industry, when we took those actions, albeit during difficult budget times, that led to where we are today. And my point in reminding everybody was, when homelessness is no longer front of mind for every resident, and that will happen over time, we as agents of government can't forget how it feels and where we are today. So we can't go back to those other bad habits of when the going gets tough and we start reducing funding to those services and programs. We can't forget that when the economy is struggling, that's when government has to lean in and make sure that these government entitlement support programs are funded to support the economy and support California residents. It's counterintuitive that when the budget is small, we have to shrink these programs. No, that's when we have to lean in and invest to support people to manage through that period and not fall off the cliff at the end.
So let's talk about homelessness, since we're there right now. A huge problem in Los Angeles, as it is in so many other areas. Let's talk about the work that you're doing, and I know you have a big focus on women and children.
And what I am coming to realize and understand clear and clear every day, that it's not a singular solution, Edie. Yes, we
Yeah.
have to build more. Yes, we need permanent supportive housing. Yes, we need to build housing that is appropriate and meets the true needs of our unhoused today. We have to do all of that. Plus, we have to talk about, economics. I jumped out there, looked at some of the amazing research across this country, some very close to home. The former mayor of Stockton, Mayor Michael Tubbs, had his demonstration project for guaranteed basic income. Talked to economists, and the bottom line is we have to stop criminalizing poverty, treating people like they're poor because they chose that, and having meaningful conversations about how we level the socioeconomic playing field. And to look at the research that came out of Stockton about what people did with that extra $500 a month, how it helped, the woman fix the carburetor on the car she owned, that allowed her to get a full-time job that was a little further away from home, as opposed to her multiple part-time jobs that she could access using public transportation. How that then allowed her to be home with her children in the evenings, how it gave her a little money, Edie, to hire tutors and put them in summer enrichment programs that every mother knows we want for our children, and our children need and deserve, regardless of how much money we earn monthly. And so I'm really excited to launch the largest in the country pilot for LA County. It'll be a 3-year pilot, $1,000 a month in the hands of 1,000 Angelinos. We're engaging with the researchers that have done this work across the country to really make sure that this makes sense. I think this will lead to different conversations amongst employers about why paying a livable wage really makes a difference fundamentally in the overall fabric of our communities and the society that we live in. So I'm really excited about our Guaranteed Basic Income pilot project. I'm excited about the work we're doing to support small businesses, particularly during the pandemic, some of whom are in the early care and education field, that we're going to give grants to those child care providers who are essential workers, who stepped up to the plate to continue to provide child care so our essential workers could go to work. All kinds of exciting programs around expanding access to healthcare services, looking at growing the second district and the industries that will be attractive here, looking at bioscience. Technology is here, but making sure that we're also equipping the people who call the second district home for 2 and 3 generations, like myself, are prepared to enter those fields and continue to call the second district home. So that's some of the exciting work that we've done in this first 100 days that I'm really excited to continue to do.
One of the things that comes to mind as I'm listening to this laundry list of projects that you are working on all simultaneously, and you were just elected in December, so you had to hit the ground running during a pandemic. We're only in the end of June here. Talk us through how you manage, and this is just some of what you're working on, by the way. I have more things I want to get to. How do you juggle all this?
Edie, I had an aha moment many years ago, and I'm glad you used the word juggle, because it is juggle. I think, we as women have been told that it's supposed to be a balancing act, and we're supposed to balance it all. And when I think about balancing, I think about scales, and that everything is supposed to kind of get even attention and treatment. And you know as well as I, as a working woman, as a mother, it's never balanced. It is a juggle. And I think about the guy on the Carol Burnett show when I was a little kid who would spin the plates, and he would get to the very end spinning the plates on the pole, and you'd think, oh, that first plate is going to drop, and he'd run back to the end and he'd catch that first plate, and all the plates would be spinning. Some of them would be kind of wobbly, and others would be spinning perfectly. I think that's my life, Edie. I spin plates, and sometimes some of them are wobbly, but I also put together an amazing team. I have an amazing, Cassandra quoted my wonderful 10-year chief of staff, Tiffany Alvidres. I have a new chief of staff here at the county level, Frederica McGee. Um, I find hardworking women who share my passion and commitment to our community, and they join me and we work at the hip. And so it's not just me spinning those plates. I had the wonderful privilege of seeing 90 Mitchell bills become law under 2 administrations, my years in the legislature. And I could not have done that without an amazing team. I've tried to replicate that here at the county level, spent a great deal of time on the front end thinking through our corporate culture. Because I think if you hire right in the beginning,
Yeah.
that's what helps keep a well-oiled machine well-oiled. So we devoted the time to make sure we had the right people in the right seats on the bus, as Jim Collins says. And I'm deeply proud of the team that's been willing to help me define what our corporate culture is and then join me in executing it for the residents of the second district. So it's the spinning plates, but I have a whole group of people that are helping me keep all those plates spinning.
So, adding to those spinning plates, I know one way that you've been addressing racial injustice and police reform has been campus by campus and rethinking whether deputies should be patrolling our schools. It's been controversial. So, talk us through your thinking behind this.
I appreciate that. Yes, it is controversial, as most public policy issues of any significance really are, quite frankly. There are perspectives across the board, and this is no different. And this was brought to me by parents in districts who had a deep concern about the experience their children were having on the campus. Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurman, invited me to participate in a Zoom last year. Where he brought this issue forward, and we were able to talk about a variety of studies, some conducted by LAUSD, LA Unified School District, and others that reflect the experience of students of color, the disproportionate number of them that would receive citation and tickets, the kinds of altercations they had with school resource officers. And so the reality is, I think that no one can argue, Edie, is that just like in our neighborhoods, it's not a consistent, equal experience. If you are Black or brown, if you live in a certain zip code, your interactions with law enforcement is very likely more frequent than others. Same with schools in particular areas of the district. When we had the motion up for consideration before the board, we had lots of public testimony, and I heard testimony from school districts and parents, and school districts in particular, and superintendents who talked about the process by which they hire school resource officers. It's a consistent officer. They know the kids' names. The kids know their names. That, in my mind, is the ideal situation that we would all want. But I also heard from parents who have contracts with the sheriff or law enforcement, who it's not a consistent officer who shows up. The officers don't have those first name basis relationships with the kids on campus. And so clearly the experience differs based on who you are and where you live. And so what we wanted to do was just to step in and make sure that the board of supervisors, not just the sheriff, had the opportunity to weigh in on those contracts, and that the school districts understand that they have a plethora of county services available to them, that they could contract with the Department of Mental Health to talk about having mental health professionals on campus, that you didn't just have to look to traditional law enforcement in terms of having a presence on your campus. And so the goal of the motion was to give districts an option from which to choose from. And I'm hoping that school districts will really engage with their student body, their teachers and staff, and their parents to talk about what kind of school climate do we want to establish that meets the needs of every student on campus. That's the goal.
I have a question about the process because I think in the news we cover the hearings that you're talking about. We cover that public comment. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes people do wonder whether the folks up at the dais ever change their minds as they're listening to public testimony, if you go in one way, and whether those hearings actually do change a viewpoint.
I'm so glad you asked that question because it also, for me, it reflects the importance of the media and the role the media plays in giving the full, complete picture. Absolutely. I came from organizing. I consider myself an activist elected official. I'm a advocate first, and that's the lens through which I bring to my policymaking experience and process. And so I remember the years of my life sitting in those hearing rooms as a paid advocate with the Western Center on Law and Poverty. And then as the CEO of Crystal Stairs, when I would bring busloads of parents to Sacramento to talk about the importance of high quality childcare for working families. And so I was there and still really most days, Edie, see myself on that side of the equation, quite frankly. Representative government is so important. And the people who are disproportionately impacted by government, the people who rely on CalWorks or subsidized childcare, who live in subsidized housing, who have children in public schools, it's the onus is on us even more so to engage because we benefit from public policy decisions and public benefit programs. And so, absolutely, I listen. You will often hear in my comments that I will refer to a comment I heard or I will respond to a comment. Just this past Tuesday, in a motion that we're considering to close Men's Central Jail in LA County, several people called in and said it was a waste of their tax dollars to demolish this building and we could use it for the unhoused. I was incensed and said in my comments, I don't know how many of you have ever been in Men's Central Jail, but I will never agree or support to move the unhoused or any group of people into a physical setting that I wouldn't want to live in or raise my children in myself. And that jail is antiquated, inhumane, and must go. And so I believe in repurposing buildings and it's appropriate to repurpose. So listening to public comment can go both ways. Sometimes I tell you when I agree with you, and sometimes I tell you when I think you've gotten it wrong. But it absolutely informs what I have always done as a policymaker. And trust me, as chair of Senate Budget Committee, I should try to calculate one day, Edie, how many hours of public comment that I've listened to and I've been an active listener to. It absolutely informs the decisions I make, um, and the public has a responsibility to engage us in that way.
I did want to ask you, but the names of these committees, sometimes I have to write it down to get it exact, but chair of the Senate Budget and Fiscal Review Committee, first African American in that role, by the way. But I mean, these were $200 billion budgets that you led the process through. And I have to think that that experience is really helpful in this current role. I mean, the Los Angeles County budget approaches 40 billion, right?
It does, and you're absolutely right. To have lived through that experience, to have been given the honor by two pro tems, first Kevin De Leon, and then again by my good friend Tony Atkins, who became pro tem. The fact that they appointed me to that position gives me great honor. And then I worked my what off on behalf of my colleagues in the Senate. I was always very flattered and honored when the dean of the Senate, my Republican colleague who served as the vice chair, would open his remarks in the budget every year, complimenting me in terms of the kind of committee I would run, The fact that he had access, the fact that I would, bend over backwards to make sure that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle had what they needed, had enough time to deliberate. And then he would go into all the things he disagreed with me on in terms of the content of the budget. But he honored the process. And I think that's really important. The budget is the process that's probably the less transparent. It's a truncated time frame. And so it was very important to me that all of my colleagues in the legislature understood where we were in the process. I took it upon myself to institute a mandatory training for new members who came into the budget process, because I thought it was important that they understood that it's different than the legislative process. It has a season. There are times when it feels like it's dragging on slow, and then all of a sudden you wake up and it's June 13th and we're working around the clock to get all the work done. The staff, I think, the budget staff, Department of Finance, the Ledger Analyst Office, all of those amazing career professionals who pour into that process, who give us the information we need, the analysis we need to make the decisions, the best decisions we can on behalf of every resident of the state of California, are unsung heroes in my mind. That's really important work. And the state of California is fortunate to have a group of men and women who understand it, and go above and beyond to deliver. And I saw it in the middle of a public health pandemic. We were able to roll out budgets that met the needs of Californians and on time.
Bravo. That is really difficult work. So we are going to open this up to people's questions in just a couple of minutes, but I started this with the heart of your work, and I did want to end my part of this with the other part of the heart of your work, which is Ryan, as you mentioned. And, Supervisor Mitchell, I have to tell you, I feel ginger sometimes about asking moms about how that relates to their work. And I think to myself, would I ask a dad this question? Probably not. But you know what? It is different for moms. It is different for women. And I really do. When I put together questions for today, one of the first things I wanted to know was how that shaped you and how you managed all of that. Just as a human being, I wanted to know.
Well, let me exhale. First of all, I appreciate you framing the question. And I look forward to watching you one day on the news when you do ask that to a male candidate. And it's happening more and more. But I appreciate the question. And I don't shy away from it, because women need to tell women, A, that we can do it, and how. Because there's no book, there's no plan, there's no one way of getting it done. As Cassandra shared, I'm an adoptive parent. Ryan will be 21 in August. It's his story to tell. But I share it in the context of people understanding how there is no single way of doing this. When I entered the legislature, Ryan was 8, and I had to figure out how to create this sense of balance. And I'm an only child. He's an only child. So, we parent in many instances, be it good, bad, or indifferent, the way we were parented. And I, used to have conversations with him at 8, similar to the ones I have with him now at almost 21. So when I decided to run for office, I told him why I wanted to run. I told him what that would mean for him. I promised him that I was clear it was a decision I was making, that I would do everything I could not to completely disrupt his childhood, which meant, Edie, when he decided to play, travel ball, that either I was at the game, the first game of the tournament, running to the airport to fly back to LA to be at afternoon sessions, running back to the airport to get back to the second day of tournaments. That his godfathers were there. I created a village when he was born, and the village without the village, first my mother, and then his godfathers and the village, I couldn't have done it. And so learning how to ask for help. I tell the story about the parent at his elementary school who I knew casually through PTA, who came up to me one day when she saw me, Edie, turning in, burning rubber on two wheels, trying to get into after school care before they, the clock started at 6:01. You've done it, I know. And this mother coming to me, let's see if I can tell the story without crying, and saying, I know you're running for office, and I've never really known anybody who's a candidate, and I don't even really know what I can do to help you, but how about I pick up Ryan every day and bring him home? Would that help you? And I fell into her arms, I think, right there in the school parking lot, because we are so used to, I can do this, I don't need any help, I have all this under control. And I didn't. And I was burning rubber into the after school care every day, and she saw it. I had another good girlfriend, Latanya, who said, the dry cleaner's closed, and I have a candidate form tomorrow, da da da. She's like, we're going to find you a dry cleaners who delivers. I was like, okay. Edie, I pushed the envelope. The Fair Political Practices Commission had a letter. They didn't have an official policy, but they had a letter saying that you could use campaign funds to pay for childcare, if you needed childcare to allow you to do campaign events. Folks weren't willing to really test it. As elected officials, we're all scared of the Fair Political Practices Commission. We don't want to be fined. We don't want to break the rules. But I said, this is BS. I'm a single working mother. I am willing to bet that the people who donate to my campaign, they know that, and they would mind if I use campaign funds to pay for the piece of childcare that has been added to my budget because I'm doing this extra campaign work. So, sometimes you have to take a risk. Sometimes you have to ask people for help. And sometimes you have to do it in unconventional ways. We all saw my former colleague in the assembly bring her baby on the assembly floor the last evenings of session last year in the middle of a public health pandemic because she couldn't figure out another way. I have real mixed feelings about that because she should have had other options. She should have had other choices. I've said that to her. I've said it to my fellow colleagues in the Women's Caucus. I also saw her standing on the floor alone with her baby, and I felt some kind of way about that because, in my opinion, she should have been surrounded by other women to either take the baby from her, to give her other options. Yeah, you know how we do. We walk up, people saw me scattered and would just take him out of my arms to let me know I got you. So it's not clean, it's not simple, it is different from women. She was a nursing mom at that time, so she had to have the baby close. But the reason I tell these stories that don't make it look glamorous, perhaps in some people's eyes don't shine me in the perfect light, it's important to have the conversation so people know it can be done. You are the captain of your own ship. You have to make the decisions that's best for you and your family. And I believe that I was able to follow my own dream and professional aspirations. I was able to serve my community and my constituency with honor and dignity. And I was able to raise my child, witnessing his mother do that, understanding that there was both benefit and sacrifice, perhaps to his life and mine. But ultimately, I believe that he and I shared the belief that it was all worth it.
I want to point out to people who may not know this, by the way, that 6 o'clock deadline is $1 a minute usually. If you are there like 30 seconds late to pick up your child, it gets extremely expensive. So
it does. And for Edie, Edie, it wasn't just the money for me. It was also my acknowledgement that those women work very hard.
Yes.
And shouldn't have to be there past 6 o'clock. They have kids to get home to and dinner to cook too. So for me, yes, it can be very expensive, but it was also just trying to honor them and not being that mom who was late every day. We know that
and how
mom,
about
and
that
I
kid?
didn't want to be her.
How about the kids sitting there, by themselves, just, waiting for that mom. So just super quickly, because She Shares is so focused on mentorship. You mentioned this a little bit with Ryan, but Cassandra clued me in that you really did create this village around him and brought in a lot of men around him to serve as mentors. And so my last question, and we probably need to keep this part a little bit short, but if you can just talk about the fact that you recognize that in such a profound way for him, the importance of these mentors around him.
Well, I've been the beneficiary of mentors. My mother's first boss out of USC ended up being my godmother, and literally, how many people have two generations? She mentored my mother professionally as well as me, and taught me the value of mentors. And so I have mentors in my life, some that are work-based, some that are personal, some that are much older than me. I've got some mentors that are younger than me. And so when I decided to parent, I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed a village. I knew once I knew Ryan was a boy that I was going to need someone to help me teach him how to stand up to do you know what. So these two men in my life were long-term friends that I had deep respect for. Jody Barnett there in Sacramento and Charles Stewart here in LA. Before Ryan was born, I asked them if they would be his godfather, and we agreed. And they're very different personalities, and I was clear. So Charles was the one that would take him to Shakespeare in the Park, and I have a picture of him reciting Shakespeare to Ryan at his first Thanksgiving. And Jody was the one that had him out in the backyard digging and going to get In-N-Out Burger at 2 a.m. And so Charles is the one that took him on his first camping trip on the beach in Mexico. So I wanted to bring into his life people that would augment his life experience, because they're different people than I am. And when I talked to Ryan's birth mother, and she was in the process of selecting me as his adoptive parent, I told her my vision, that I had these two men in my life and the commitment they made to yet this unborn baby. And she said, I have to tip my hat to you, that you've given this so much thought. And I really did. I think partially in that I'm an only child, and that my mother created that kind of village for me, that we did family vacations with other families who had kids. And that's what I tried to replicate with Ryan. We can't do it by ourselves. We have to ask for help, because as parents, we're not perfect.
Amen. I love that approach. Okay, so here are some questions that have come in.
Okay.
Have you ever had an experience where men tried to marginalize you, especially when you came into a leadership role, and how did you handle that?
All day, every day. To the last day I left the Senate floor, I had colleagues who would mansplain me and try to ostracize me. And, I have this wonderful side hustle. I'm the legislator in residence at Mount St. Mary's University here in my district, which is an all-women's school. And so I do 3 or 4 kind of leadership conversations. I believe giving people proximity to leadership is important. Giving young women proximity. They read about women leaders, but to be proximate, to ask me very, personal questions, like we've had this conversation today, which she shares. And, the young women, it troubles me, always say, well, you're the only woman, and how does it feel? And their body language, the way they frame the question is timid. Like, how do you feel when you're the only woman in the group? And I said, you know what? I need you all to have a paradigm shift. I said, I'm going to go back and ask my male colleagues, how do they feel when I walk in with the gavel and I'm running budget committee? How do they feel? And so that's the kind of attitude I've tried to carry. As you know, I'm 6 feet tall. Some people attribute my carriage and the way I can regulate with my height. I would like to think that if I were 4'1", that I would have the same kind of power and determination in my step and my attitude. And I think women must embrace that and internalize that and believe it. And then we have to ask the men how they feel when we walk in the room and we're large and in charge. Sorry, not sorry.
Questions for future interviews. I would love to hear about the Crown Act. What is it? What has it meant? Describe the movement it led to. That's all one.
Edie, you all remember the news coverage of the young wrestler in New Jersey 2 years ago now, who had his hair locked the way I wear my hair. And we saw the referee viciously cutting his locks right there in the middle of the tournament. A referee had determined that it wasn't appropriate for the wrestling match. Now, the young man had been wrestling in the tournament days prior, and Dove, a subsidiary of Unilever, had done this study asking Black women our attitude about our own hair. And 80% of the people they polled said that they did not work someplace where they could wear their hair in its natural state. Locks like mine, twists, or braids. We started seeing the number of Black girls being suspended from school for going to school with their hair braided. And Edie, for me, it was this aha moment that I'm a product of the 80s. I wore my hair in braids with the elaborate beadwork, which was very popular in the 80s, all through high school, 40 years ago. And it was never a question. And I thought, how did we get to this place where natural hair is being shunned in the workplace and school, to the point where Black girls are being suspended? The parents sent me the letters that showed me the letters that said, you're being sent home from school because your hair is a distraction to others. So we have one group of people, Black men and women, whose professions are being compromised, who either aren't getting promotions or aren't being hired for jobs because of a personal choice, Edie, how I choose to wear my hair. And so this movement began, where we want to declare that a Eurocentric standard of what's acceptable in the workplace or beauty does not apply to me. Hair is a race-based trait. My hair naturally grows in a different texture than yours. And I shouldn't be limited on my hairstyles based on this perception of what's professional. No member of the legislature decided to not vote on a Mitchell bill or didn't vote on a Mitchell budget bill because I choose to wear my hair in dreadlocks. They didn't. It has had no bearing on my capacity on how I do my job. And so we had to talk about that why are workplaces and schools discriminating against Black people for our hairstyle choice. So CROWN is an acronym. It stands for Creating a Respectful and Open Workplace for Natural Hair. It is now, California was the first. Governor Newsom signed it July 3rd, 2 years ago. It is now in 13 states across the country. There is a federal bill that has passed the House of Representatives, modeled after California's CROWN Act, literally to the T, that is now sitting on the U.S. Senate floor, carried by Senator Booker, that we hope it will become a national law, that hairstyle choice should be protected, just like my gender, my race, my age.
Next question is Tiffany, your chief of staff, says you often tell women to never give away your power. What do you mean by that?
Well, that is my mother's name was Sylvia Johnson, and we have Sylvia Johnson-isms. And she taught me from a very young kid that, people have personal power and positional power. And there are examples in all of our lives of people who don't have titles. They may not be governors or supervisors or senators, but we know they have personal power in our community. We know that when we have a problem, we need something done at the community, that there are people in the community you go to start that ball rolling. And those are people with personal power. And my mother's point was both should be honored, personal power and positional power. And even when you have positional power, you should always maintain your personal power, because those positions, those titles can go away. And so what I've always said to Tiffany, and particularly the women who work for me, who would come to me to ask a question or defer a decision to someone else, don't give your power away. You've been given this opportunity to lead an organization, a group, a board of supervisors, whatever the case is. Don't give your power away. Lean in. You were given this opportunity because of what you bring to the process. So lean in and make the decision. Don't give your power away.
Supervisor Mitchell, I'm going to leave it there because I can't imagine a better place to leave this conversation. Thank you so much for your time. It's been just an absolute joy to have this conversation.
The honor was absolutely mine. Thank you. Thank you, Cassandra, for that amazing introduction, and to all of the visionaries, to the board members and the visionaries around She Shares. These are important opportunities for women to connect with women, to help empower
Yes.
women, and to tell women, don't give your power away.
Thank you. And I have a couple more thank yous. Tamara Torlikson, who organizes these, thank you for the kabillions of details that you keep track of. Thank you, Dry Bar, our wonderful sponsor, who wanted you all to see what they're capable of. So maybe go pay them a visit. My daughter got to come with me this morning for her first fancy hair, and it was a wonderful experience. Ryan at the Lux, who got us all where we are technically today, thank you. And thank you to everyone who joined us for this conversation. Even though it's remote and virtual, this has been a gathering of hundreds of people and just so enjoyable. So follow us on social media to find out more about our next amazing speaker. We're still working on the details there, but we hope to see you at the next She Shares event. And soon we will be all back together in person.